Hey guys, this is Clinton Jeff and this is my review of the Vivo V17 Pro. Think your new phone with 4 cameras is the latest in tech, or think that phone with 5 cameras is the best? Well, I have news for you. This is the Vivo V17 Pro and it has 6 cameras. It feels like just yesterday when HTC pushed out a phone with 2 cameras on the back and people were freaking out about it. And here's Vivo just casually putting out a phone with 6 cameras, like no big deal, just another day in the Chinese tech industry. And as if a quad camera at the back wasn't good enough, this is the world's first phone with a pop-up dual front-facing camera mechanism. Which makes sense because Vivo has always pitched themselves as a company that focuses on selfie cameras. Alright, so are all of these cameras actually adding up to anything good, or is it just total overkill? Let's kick off the Vivo V17 Pro review with design. Vivo's V series of smartphones have always managed to look good with a premium design, and it's the same case here. In addition to that sweet display with no notches to spoil it, there's also a gorgeous textured glass back. You can see that I got the white version, which looks pretty darn fantastic. It looks so pretty that I couldn't help take a couple pictures that I posted on my Instagram account. But the most unique thing about this phone is the pop-up dual camera mechanism. I just love that we live in a time where dual pop-up front-facing cameras are a thing. The entire pop-up mechanism seems reliable enough in the week that I used the Vivo V17 Pro. Along with the 2 front-facing cameras, it also contains the earpiece slit and the front-facing selfie light that Vivo calls their Moonlight selfie light. It's worth mentioning that the Vivo V17 Pro also has an in-display fingerprint reader. There's also support for face unlock, but that'll try to pop up the camera every time you try to unlock your phone. So I wouldn't really recommend using face unlock unless you really want to show off that pop-up camera. As you'd expect, the mechanism has support for fall detection, so it'll retract if it senses a drop. It can also be pushed in manually with your fingers if you're strange and you want to do that. I wouldn't really recommend doing that though. Moving on, the rest of the front of the V17 Pro is pretty much your usual notchless Vivo phone with slim bezels all around the sides. There's a tiny bit of a chin at the bottom, but it's not too bad. But while I'm here, let me talk about that display. The Vivo V17 Pro boasts a huge 6.44-inch ultra full view display with no notches and FHD resolution. But if that lack of a notch and slim bezels weren't enough, Vivo is also using a Super AMOLED screen here for super deep blacks and gorgeously nicely saturated colors all around with good outdoor visibility as well, thanks to the solid amount of brightness it can deliver. Getting a Super AMOLED screen at this price range is a totally awesome move by Vivo, because you'd really expect premium specs out of something that costs this much. And Vivo has certainly delivered. It makes watching videos and playing games on this display a really great experience. Of course, there's also a few software features along with that screen. There's the usual eye protection mode, a dark mode, and there's also anti-flicker, which prevents any screen flickering at low brightness. But with a large display, you also get a large phone. The V17 Pro measures 159 by 74 by 9.8 millimeters and weighs in at about 201 grams. Still, it's not as large as most phones today, and turns out it's actually very comfortable to use one-handed. This is also because the back of the phone is slightly curved, which makes it more ergonomic to fit the curve of your palm. Coming to the back, obviously the first thing that grabs your attention is the quad camera setup that's placed horizontally in the center towards the top, along with an LED flash as well. The module for the 4 cameras has a silver edge, which goes along pretty well with the overall design for the back panel. Meanwhile, towards the bottom, there's just the Vivo logo printed underneath the glass panel. You'll notice that the back panel has a really interesting finish that's glossy but also has neat reflections against the light, and this actually looks really gorgeous in person, which is a pity because you're probably going to put this in a case. Speaking of which, the case that comes along with the Vivo V17 Pro in the box is by far the most intense case I've ever used on a phone. I mean, this case will protect your phone for sure, but it is really hard to get off once you put it on the phone. You can get a better look at it in my unboxing video if you want. Moving on the right side, you'll find the usual power button and volume button combo, but on the left side, you'll find a button to trigger Google Assistant, which kind of seems to be a thing nowadays. You can customize the button between Google Assistant or Vivo's own Jovi voice assistant, but that's kind of about it. Just like on the Nokia 7.2, I really wish there was a way to customize customize this button and maybe remap it to something that could be potentially more useful. But hey, if you're a big Google Assistant fan, here's an easy way to trigger it. At the top of the Vivo V17 Pro, you'll find the space where the dual front-facing cameras pop up from, along with a pinhole for the secondary noise-cancelling microphone, and you'll also find a good old-fashioned headphone jack. Hooray! While at the bottom, you'll see a USB Type-C port along with a pinhole for the main microphone. There's also the single loudspeaker, which is not too loud but good enough with clear audio even at high volumes. You'll also find the SIM card tray here, which has slots for dual nano SIM cards. All in all, the Vivo V17 Pro is a pretty gorgeous smartphone that's comfortable to hold and use and has very solid build quality as well. Vivo has done a really good job here. Alright, let's move on to hardware. The Vivo V17 Pro is powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon 675 processor coupled with 8GB of RAM and 128GB of onboard storage. Now this is the only thing that's actually been criticized about the Vivo V17 Pro, because this is the same processor that was used on the V15 Pro, which launched much earlier this year. In terms of performance, the Snapdragon 675 already has a reputation of being a really good, reliable processor that can easily handle your everyday tasks without breaking a sweat. From multitasking to general navigation, everything was quick and snappy with no lag or weirdness. But when you run those benchmarks, you'll see that the Vivo V17 Pro gets pretty modest results, just like every Snapdragon 675 phone. In terms of gaming performance, of course, you can play casual games like Candy Crush and Subway Surfer without any issues at all. When it comes to more processor-intensive games like Asphalt 9 or PUBG, they're also pretty playable, but you'll want to stick to medium settings. There's also a game boost feature built in which tries to enhance gaming performance, but from my experience, it doesn't really make that much of a dramatic improvement. So yeah, this is kind of awkward. At this price point, you'd expect a better processor, like at least a Snapdragon 712 instead. But honestly, I don't think Vivo really means for this to be a gaming phone. As you'll see in the camera section that I'll talk about in a sec, this is a camera-first phone. And performance is good enough to handle the cameras, and it can also handle most games just fine. Because you have to understand that Vivo's target audience is camera quality fans. Performance is more Realme and OnePlus, but Vivo's made a name for themselves with cameras, and the V17 Pro had to make a compromise somewhere. So yeah, even though it's not great when you consider everything else that you're getting with the V17 Pro, I don't think that the Snapdragon 675 is that big of an issue. Just hold on until I get to the camera section. But before that, let's talk about software. The Vivo V17 Pro runs FunTouch OS 9 based on Android 9 Pie. Alright, you have to admit, FunTouch OS isn't exactly known as the most user-friendly custom UI around, but over the years, Vivo has actually been improving it ever so steadily. And while there are still some quirks in my opinion, the UI is actually pretty usable right now. There's a multitude of software features, from the ultra power saving mode to the app encryption. There's a motorbike mode and pretty much whatever feature you'd expect out of a phone in this price range. In fact, the UI is pretty much exactly similar to the competition out there, except for one very unique Vivo thing, which is a swipe up for something that's like the control center on iOS, but Vivo calls it the shortcut center instead. Hot tip, you can actually customize the UI so that the shortcut center is a swipe down from the right side of the phone, just like on the iPhone. There's also Vivo's Smart Motion feature, which is actually pretty convenient. There's double tap to lock the screen, raise to wake. There's the ability to draw an alphabet shortcut to open up a certain app on the lock screen itself. And you can even answer a phone call by just placing the phone next to your ear. All in all, FunTouch OS does have its own quirks, but at the end of the day, you'll either love it or hate it. Alright, let's move on to the most fun bit. The camera. Vivo's V series of phones have always been very focused on the cameras, or rather the selfie cameras more recently. So we're gonna have to start with the most unique feature of the V17 Pro, which is the pop-up dual selfie cameras. There's a 32 megapixel primary front-facing camera with a f2.0 aperture, and there's also an autofocus sensor that helps keep it fast at focusing on your face. Next to that, there's an 8 megapixel super wide-angle lens sensor with 105 degrees of field of view, along with the moonlight flash. In terms of image quality, photos from the main 32 megapixel front camera are pretty good and quite sharp overall. There's a little bit of beautification features, but that's standard with most Chinese phones nowadays. Overall image quality is pretty good even in low light, thanks to the new ultra low light mode and the front facing moonlight flash. Photos from the 8 megapixel super wide angle selfie camera also come out pretty nice and sharp with plenty of details, but since this is a wide angle camera, there's obviously a bit of fisheye effect to deal with, and there's more distortion towards the edges of the photos. This camera is really meant for you to take pictures of you and your gang of friends, so I guess it works well enough. The moonlight flash is a soft diffused light that's similar to the soft lighting used by most professional photographers to take portrait photos, and it does a pretty good job. The front-facing cameras can also record video up to 1080p resolution as well, which is nice if you're a YouTuber, I guess. Of course, I should also mention that there are quite a few shooting modes for the front-facing cameras, like a bokeh mode, which allows you to manually adjust the amount of blur and even change the focus point after taking a photo. Alright, so that's about it for the front-facing cameras. Now let's talk about the rear cameras. There's a 48 megapixel Sony IMX582 primary sensor at the back, which used to be a big deal earlier this year, but is pretty much on every phone nowadays. And just like those phones, the images here are shot at 48 megapixel, and then pixel binning is used to bring it down to a lower resolution but with more detail. Obviously, you can also choose to shoot at the full 48 megapixels as well, but then your file sizes will be pretty huge. In terms of image quality, photos from the main sensor actually look pretty great. There's a good amount of sharp details with great dynamic range as well and nicely saturated colors. Photos have a slightly warmish reddish tone, but overall I was actually really impressed. Photos actually look pretty great from the V17 Pro. Also at the back is an 8 megapixel super wide angle camera and a 13 megapixel telephoto lens with 2x optical zoom and 10x digital zoom. There's also a fourth lens, but that's just a 2 megapixel depth sensor. The super wide angle camera can shoot 120 degree field of view photos, which are pretty impressive quality with lesser levels of distortion than you'd see on most other wide angle cameras, even on the edges of the photo. There's also a super macro mode that allows you to take a photo of something as close as 2.5 centimeters away, which is pretty darn close. If you're into capturing pictures of bugs and leaves, I guess this is useful to you. But I personally don't think macro mode is a big deal. The cool thing here is that you can use macro mode in video as well. Lastly, of course, there's also a night mode as well, which does a pretty good job in low light conditions. It's nothing amazing, but it's not too bad at all. Overall camera quality on the Vivo V17 Pro is actually really good. I gotta admit, I'm actually quite impressed. I'm really happy that all 6 of those cameras weren't just for show. This is definitely the key highlight of this phone. Alright, let's move on to battery life. The Vivo V17 Pro is powered by a massive 4100 mAh battery and also supports 18 watt fast charging. Battery life is pretty good as you'd expect from that mAh rating. On a day of moderate usage with a couple photos and the usual bits of video streaming and gaming, I was still able to get back home with some decent amount of battery life. And charging the phone from 0 to full just takes about an hour and a half, which also isn't too bad either. So yeah, overall battery life on the V17 Pro is pretty good. You will definitely reach home at the end of the day with some battery percentage left. So yeah, no complaints there. Alright guys, it's time for the CJ verdict, and here we go. The Vivo V17 Pro has a lot going for it. There's the crazy 6 cameras all around, which does a pretty good job. There's the great display that's all screen thanks to the pop-up cameras. There's reliable battery life, and the design is pretty sweet as well. So what's not to like about this phone? Well, there's only really one thing, the pricing. This puts the Vivo V17 Pro way too close to the OnePlus 7 and the OnePlus 7T, which are fantastic phones with great performance and flagship specs. But admittedly, those cameras aren't as great as what you'd find on the V17 Pro. There's also the Pixel 3a, which has that one impressive camera, but loses out almost everywhere else to the V17 Pro. Honestly, at the end of the day, if you just want the best cameras in the price range for both selfies and rear camera shots, the Vivo V17 Pro is it. If you want better performance or a newer chipset, obviously there are better choices out there. But if your primary concern is camera, the Vivo V17 Pro is gonna keep you pretty happy. Alright guys, that's what I think about the Vivo V17 Pro. As always, if you guys have any questions about this phone, let me know right in the comment section below, or you can reach out to me directly on Instagram or Twitter at ClintonJeff. And hey, if this video has been useful to you and you like it, don't forget to hit the like button right below, or maybe subscribe because that would be appreciated. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.